So it's the start of the year, you've picked out this big goal, and I realised this is getting pretty scary. And not exciting scary, but just downright unsettling. You're going to start questioning everything if you've made one big mistake. But you're not alone in this, right? Ash and I, we've both walked down this path before. Ash made a big country move.
Was like, I'm moving to Switzerland. You can go anywhere else, but I'm going there. The hardest part was leaving that behind. She decided she wanted to be with me.
I made a big career shift. My life had changed completely because we were going to lose our house. Had been into school and said, I don't have a daddy anymore. And today we're talking about what we actually did to make sure those shifts worked for us. The big decision that I'm going to talk about, which was a goal for me, was leaving the RAF. So from when I was about 15, I'd worked towards getting into the military. I went to the army because that's who had sponsored me. I went through their training. I was medically discharged. I came out. I then had a couple of years before then going back into the military, into the RAF this time. So I'd committed from being 15, a huge portion of my life to being in the military. I'd overcome all sorts of challenges, like I said, medically discharged, and then going back in, it'd been a lot. However, from when I was 15 to when I decided I wanted to leave, my life had changed completely. I was now married and I had a child. And the idea of traveling around the world, seeing different things, was great when I was younger. However, I was now spending time away from my family. I was being called upon to go away at short notice. All of these things might work for someone in the RAF or in the military in the wider context, but for me, I decided that the priority needed to be family, so I needed to make a change. This was going to be a huge change. I needed to work out how I was going to support my family, so I needed a new career. Was I going to stay in the same sort of industry? How was I going to take the skills that I'd learned over the last number of years and put that into a different career? We lived in a military house, so we needed to buy a new house or rent or do something, right? Because we were going to lose our house. We were living in a relatively expensive area because of where I was posted at the time. So I didn't even know where we were going to live, never mind having to get somewhere. I felt great. I'd made the decision. It was, right, that's it, we're going to do it. And it's like, oh, right, great. There's all these things to think about. It's quite scary.
What helped you through that?
I think what helped me through that was knowing that it was the right thing to do. I had been away during my wife's pregnancy, and there was another dad there, and he said that his, I think, daughter had been into school and said, I don't have a daddy anymore. Not because his daughter didn't understand that she still had a dad, right? They talked on the phone and stuff, but he wasn't there. And that was the only way that she could convey that as a concept. And I came back from that going, that's tough. And this was before my son was born. And I wasn't meant to go away again for a while. And when my son was about 3 months old, I went away again. And that's when I made the decision that this was too much. I was away when my wife needed me. I was missing my son growing up, especially in those early days when they changed so much so quickly. So I think having that as a reason, being really grounded in the reason I'm doing this, that made life easier.
And then how did you figure out what you wanted to do? So you ended up in IT consulting. What was the path between where you were to where you ended up?
Yeah, so I had to work out what skills I already had. So I was within the IT space in the RAF. So I took those skills and I applied for a bunch of stuff. And luckily, a recruiter reached out to me. And I went for the interviews and I took all of the learnings that I had, or the knowledge I had, and into that. And clearly they loved me because they offered me a job. I think I knew I needed to get out. The idea of what I did when I got out, I was a little more fuzzy about. I think I saw it as once I'm out, it's going to be easier and I can work from there. So I kind of kept that single goal of I need to leave the military because it was the goal that was important and that job achieved my goal. So it's going to be different for someone else who might be thinking about a career shift because they might be looking for a specific career to move into.
Yeah, and like having to obtain those skills in order to like be able to shift in.
Yeah. Whereas I took the skills I had and the experience that I had, and was able to push into this career.
And then did you move location as well, like in terms of where you're living? And obviously you said you're in military housing.
Yeah, so we were based down south and needed to move, and we only had one income, so we're going, great. I also don't know what that income's going to be because we need to move whilst looking for a job. So we moved into the northeast because we thought, right, that's a really affordable place. We knew a few people up there. So yes, as part of this, we had not just a career shift, but also a shift in home location as well.
How long did it take you from like making that decision to like making that a reality?
Probably about a year. So we started looking at what jobs are available. Does it make sense? Where do we need to live? Made sure that we put the financials in place to make sure we had the deposit for a house. My wife and I never planned for me to be in the military forever, but this was moving out of the military earlier than planned. Yeah. So we hadn't been saving up for a long time to be ready for this sort of thing. So we had to make some financial decisions as well. How different is that from your story?
I think it's similar in the sense that I think there was a long time delay between making the decision and then going through with it. I also sort of tested it out to make sure the decision. So for those that don't know, I moved from New Zealand to the UK. I was in my final year of my MBA at the time. And then after I finished my MBA, I organized a holiday across Germany, Netherlands and the UK, and I went to various different cities to kind of get a feel of what is life like on this side of the world. And my wife, having already gone to Switzerland, was like, I'm moving to Switzerland. You can go anywhere else, but I'm going there because I really love that place. And so we went into it thinking we might be, I say long distance, but long distance in New Zealand is like really long. Over here it's like 1 or 2 hour flights, so it's not as long, if that makes sense. And so we thought, okay, well, Ashley might end up in the UK and my wife might end up in Switzerland, and then we'll sort of see each other when we can, sort of thing. But after going through that holiday and doing that test, we kind of realized, well, I realized really quickly that London was the place. And then I literally went back within maybe 4.5 weeks, 5 weeks, I was back here. So the decision-making process was very quick because I'd already applied for the visa. I'd already like gone through a lot of the decision-making and getting used to the idea prior to making that decision. I think the hardest part would have been so my employer at the time in New Zealand helped me through my MBA and was help coaching me, and I was in a leadership position, and I think the hardest part was leaving that behind. And now most might say hardest was leaving my family and like my friends and stuff like that, and that was hard, sure, but maybe not as hard as like what I'd worked toward and what I was trying to achieve in my career. I think once I got here, I was 11 weeks without work, approximately, applied for hundreds of jobs, albeit I was using the same approach as I'd use in New Zealand, which is probably not the best approach, which is just applying, trying to call up recruiters and get relationships with them and what have you. Whereas my wife, when she eventually decided to move to this side of the world, about 4 or 5 months later, she did move to London because she decided she wanted to be with me. And she took a very different approach, right? She went to a conference or a couple conferences, met with people, networked, and she was in a job much sooner. She took a very different approach. Seemed to work for her. But I think there was a lot of uncertainty, especially in the first few weeks. I think the first few weeks, it's kind of like, oh, you're in a new place. I'm just going to go look around, and sort of feels like a holiday. And then your money starts running out and you're like, this doesn't feel like a holiday. There's no more money coming in. Yeah. So then you start, like, reality sort of sets in and you start going, okay, well, I need to think about making finding a job, a job, if that makes sense.
What led to? Because you said kind of you were able to do it quickly
Yeah,
because you'd set yourself up already. But
yeah.
what was the? You must have already been thinking about it. Was there
I
something
th-
that changed your mind, and you're like, okay, this is something that I really want to do? I think.
I think when I was about 18 or 17 or 18, I think in my teenage years, my parents used to try and incentivize me to pass my exams every year from like 15, 16, 17. So the last 3 years of high school. And for 17, the incentive was a trip for my 18th birthday to go to Melbourne. And I think during that trip, I realized how big the world was, even though Melbourne's only maybe 3 or 4 million people. It made me realize more about actually, I'm not suited to stay in New Zealand. I want to go see the world. So in my mind, I always thought I'm going to move to Melbourne. I'm going to move to Melbourne. After uni, I'll move to Melbourne. And I used to tell people all the time, like I tell my aunts and my cousins and everyone, I'm moving, I'm moving. I'm moving. I, I didn't move. um, because every time I would look to move, I would either be already in a career where I was earning more than I'd earn to move. And so I'd always be like, oh, well, it doesn't make sense. I'm living at home. Sure, I pay for some of the bills, but mostly I'm saving a hell of a lot. So then why would I move to Melbourne where I've got to outlay so much more money? And so then, well, then I ended up living at home till I was 29 until I met my wife and she convinced me to move out. I guess it made it easier because during those many, like my 20s, I ended up saving. I ended up getting the career that I needed, well, that I wanted to achieve to a certain point. To then, when I did move to this country, I wasn't moving into a junior role. I was still relatively like for like. I wouldn't say it was like for like, but it was less of a step down, if that makes sense, than I would have if I'd moved when I was earlier in my career.
So there might be people listening to this who trying to work through this conversation. They might be in a position where they think they might want to go and experience something else, but maybe they're like you. Maybe they have put a lot of effort into their career and they're in a good place, they're earning good money. What do you think changed for you, and what might be helpful for other people to hear that's led to you moving and still finding the success that you want?
I think there's never a good. It's like investing. There's never a good time. Like I think than the present, right? And or like 20 years ago. I feel like actually, if I had moved straight after uni, I'd probably be further on in my career now, relatively speaking. So in New Zealand, you can, because it's smaller, you've got the opportunity to move up quicker, but equally, not everyone moves out of the way for you to move up. So then, because the population's not there, so then you end up going, okay, well, progression might be a bit slower, but you can, as in, what's the right way to put this? I guess if you're lucky, and I attribute it to luck, right? People left at the right time for me to move up into that position, or I did the right things in terms of learning the right things at the right time in order to move into those positions. Whereas if I think about being here it feels like you're more of a expert. You've got to be an expert in one thing versus like a jack of all trades per se. I think if I'd come earlier, I'd probably have found my what is my deep tea versus my the breadth of my experience. But I don't think there's a right thing or a wrong thing. I think a lot of it has got to do with if you're in a trade or if you're in IT or if you're in accountancy or whatever you're in, it's like doing that research up front to go, what's the market look like over there? Talking to other people that are already working there and trying to figure out, okay, well, so example would be Kiwis in London Facebook group. You could talk to people on there and say, look, this is the type of work that I do. This is the sort of level I'm at. What are the career opportunities in the area that you're looking to move toward? If you're moving to London, that is. But there's similar forums and groups and things like that out there. You can jump on Reddit and you can pose a question in order to like seek that information that helps you kind of go, actually, it's not as scary and not as fearful as it might be, or without the
Yeah.
information. Yeah.
And I think that's something that we wanted to bring across in this episode was these are two examples from us, but they've worked, right? And I think a big part of the fact that they worked, or the reason why they worked, is just because we had to make them work.
Yeah.
When you moved, you had to make it work. You had to find a job. When I decided to leave the RAF, I had a family to support. I needed to find a new career. So I found a new career and we've made it work. So maybe something to take away for you as the person listening is you're probably going to make it work. You'll land on your feet, but it's just scary to take that step. You kind of touched on it there, but surely there must have been a conversation with your partner, because if you were moving to the other side of the world and she hadn't done yet and might be moving to somewhere different, like you must have had some discussions around that. How did that work?
Well, we did have many discussions around it. I think because she'd spent some time in Switzerland on holiday maybe the year before we met. So she already had in her mind that she wanted to move to a different part of the world, and that was in our discussions when we were dating before we moved in together, that she'd be open to other places. Maybe not as quick as maybe it happened, in the sense that we went on holiday, I came back, quit my job, and I left. Maybe not that quick, I would say, but we were talking. And I think the biggest thing there was like we would make sure that we're communicating. Well, actually, as soon as I had the idea the previous year, before I applied for the visa, I said, look, I'm thinking about this. I don't know if it's real, but this is the feeling and what I'm gravitating towards. And it's hard because, I've had friends or like people around me that have moved countries and they've ended relationships in order to do that. I'm going to bring luck back into this. Like, I feel that it's lucky that I met someone that wants the similar things in life. It may not have been London, it was Switzerland, and I actually thought we were going to do a long distance relationship for a while, and then that turned out not to be the case. But I think, yeah, I think a part of it is just communicating.
Yeah. Because, I had to do the same. We had a really difficult day when the last time that I was working away, my wife really needed me at home. Our son was about 3 months old at the time, so I knew that she was struggling. But also, I would come home, so that time when I was away, I wasn't abroad. I was away, but I was in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working away for a period of time, then coming home, going away again. And I didn't have huge amounts of communication back home at the time because I was working weird shifts and stuff. But I would come home and loads of things would have changed. My son would have changed. Where we had the nappies would have changed. Where something was in the cupboard had changed. And I was coming home and I was feeling like I wasn't part of the family. It was a kind of a fear that I was having. It was something that I was feeling. And I think I needed to communicate that, because if I'd have just kept that in and not communicated that with my wife, it wouldn't have helped either of us. We needed to work on this as a couple, because we relied on my income. Any change to my career was a huge change to both of us. And I guess to our son, as we had a family at the time. So that conversation needed to happen because I couldn't do that in isolation. And I think it's really important to have that conversation, because you can't just assume that person is going to be on board. I might have come with this fear and this decision that I want to leave the RAF, it's not right. And she might have not been on the same page. She might have gone, actually, I really like where we're living at the moment. Yes, it's difficult with you being away, but that's not going to be forever. Various different things. She might have had a different opinion. It turns out she didn't. She was perfectly happy for me to leave and change things up because it worked for both of us. But I couldn't have, if I'd have just assumed that and ploughed forward, that could have led to some proper big problems. And the same might have happened for you. Like if you hadn't discussed it, and you went, "Oh, I'm off to London. See ya." And she's like, "Well, I'm staying in New Zealand, or I'm going to Switzerland, and I don't want to do a long distance thing." They'd be like, "Oh, cool. What does that mean?" What does that mean for our relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if she had stayed in New Zealand, I don't know whether we would be. Well, we were engaged at the time, so I think it would have been 2 years of being long distance. And instead of doing as many holidays as I've done here, I'd probably been going back home each year in order to see her or meet her halfway or something like that. I think life would be quite different to the way it is now. So it's something I realized when I moved. Like the decision that I made in 2019 that I'd move here, I realized like we just came back from from China on holiday, and one of the things I said to my wife was, London still feels right. Because we've been thinking about, okay, after we get citizenship in a few years' time, like, what do we do next? And actually, the answer seems to always be that actually I'm in the right place, and that most of my life is how I see my life being, if that makes sense, in the place that I'm at. So, like, I like the home we live in, I like the area we live in, I like that well, luckily for both of us, we work in a place where we can work remotely or work from home. Of course, sometimes we've got to go to clients, but that flexibility is quite helpful, and it points me towards like the decision. Even though it was such a big decision back then, every day I'm still deciding that that's the right thing, if that makes sense. Maybe not consciously.
No, but I think it is important because you have to feel that it's still right. Because otherwise, if it's not, you might have made that change 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and it's feeling like it's not right. And maybe that's, you telling yourself that actually there might be a new change to come.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
for me, it might have been, I needed to get out the RAF, and I've landed in this career. And now I've been in this career for a couple of years. It might be, I need a change, and if something's not feeling right, then I've got to question that again for myself.
Yeah.
And that might not be where I'm at today, but maybe in the future, maybe that is. I think we touched on it a little bit before, but something we wanted to kind of remind people of is you might have made this decision, this big decision at the start of January, because it's the time that everybody comes and does New Year's resolutions and sets goals and everything else. And you might now be starting to feel that fear like we talked about at the start. But one of the big things that we wanted to push here was to not retreat, don't back down from it. If it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. Just because it might be difficult, and just because that change might not happen overnight. To me, leaving the RAF took 12 months. But there were so many little steps along the way that I had to take to get there. If it felt too big, or because it wasn't happening today, if I hadn't made all those points, if Ash hadn't applied for the visa, all those things, then we wouldn't have been in the places that we were today. We wouldn't have achieved that goal. Have the goal. Be afraid of it. But make the plan. Work out what it is you need to do. Prioritize that and take action towards it. Because if you don't, you'll never achieve that goal.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said earlier, you're probably going to land on your feet.
Yeah.
Even if you have to take a little step backwards, you can land on your feet and be in a better place.
Yeah, I think so. I think even though like it might be messy along the way, I don't think it's always like a straight line towards where you want to go. But if you're willing to stick at it, I think, and work through the different steps that you need in order to get there, I think it's definitely achievable.
And maybe you need to be prepared to take a step backwards. When I changed career, when I left the RAF, I took a pay cut. Because leaving the RAF was the right thing to do for me and my family at the time. And it's taken the last few years to get back to the same level of pay that I had when I left. And it's probably going to take another couple of years to hopefully be able to progress past what I could have been earning. But that salary wasn't the thing I was chasing. So my life improved by leaving the RAF because it was the right thing to do for my family at the time. It meant taking a step back somewhere else. And that might be the case for you with your goal. You might have to take a step back in some areas of your life in order to achieve it. And that can be scary, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Thanks.